Okay, we are live. So if you're looking in your book now, it's on page 381. If you're looking in the screen, it's going to be pulled up in a moment. I just want to also mention one of the foundations of Tanya is based on a teaching that is from the Arizal. The Arizal, his name was actually Rabbi Isaac Luria. In fact, our Siddur that we pray from, although it was established by the members of the Great Assembly 2,500 years ago, 2,700 years ago, it is, or 2,600 years ago, it is nonetheless, sections of it are based on the version, or in Hebrew called the Nusach, of the Arizal. The Arizal, his name was Rabbi Isaac Luria. He was a Kabbalist in Tzafat in northern Israel. Actually, on our trip, the first day of our trip, Monday, March 21st, we're going to be in Tzfat. That's the first day's trip is Tzfat and Meron, which is the mountain of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Which, if you remember in the news on Lag BaOmer, April 30th, there was a tragedy that happened there when it was packed, obviously, but this is going to obviously be a much lighter trip. So definitely time for prayer there. But Rabbi Isaac Luria was one of the great fathers of Kabbalah. He lived in Tzfat in 1500s. He died in 1572. And one of the main teachings of our Tanya is the revolution of the two souls. Where is that from? It's from these great Kabbalists living in Tzfat. So it's from the Arizal, which is what we quoted in chapter 1 of Tanya, the teaching of the two souls, as well as from his teacher, whose name is Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who also is buried right next to him in Tzfat. So anyway, the reason why I mentioned Rabbi Isaac Luria is because today is his yahrzeit, the 5th of Av, which is today, is the yahrzeit, the anniversary of passing of this great tzaddik, of this great righteous, holy rabbi. He's known as the Ari, because the Ari means the lion. Ari is a lion in Hebrew, so he's known as the Ari of blessed memory. Zal, the Z-A-L in Hebrew, stands for Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. So he's known simply as the Arizal. But his real name was Rabbi Isaac Luria. Unfortunately, he was taken at such an early age of 38 years old. But his impact and his imprint of teachings of Torah into the world is eternal. And today is his yahrzeit, so definitely a good day to study. Oh, thank you. It is the Ari's yahrzeit. Great. Shira, did you write that before me, or did you before I said that? Or that's so cool. Awesome. Very great job, Shira. Okay, you're right on it. Cool. So if you're, it's a great day to study Torah together. And also what we're learning about is the importance of studying Torah, which is today's section, that when we study Torah, I guess we'll see it inside, but we are making a home for God in our heart. As we learned just at the end of last week, we learned that when from the day the temple was destroyed, which is coming up on Sunday, we mark the anniversary of the temple's destruction. It's known in Hebrew as Tisha B'Av, which means the 9th day of the month of Av. It's a day that not only the first, but even the second, both temples were destroyed. So it's the commencement of our exile, our spiritual darkness, which began when the temple was destroyed and the light of God was kind of dimmed from Jerusalem. Where is that light of God found? That's found in Torah study. So that's where we concluded last week. Is every time we study Torah, we are connecting with God's wisdom, which is what Torah is. It's God's wisdom, as well as God's will and desire, which are the mitzvot of God, are all included in the laws that we study, in the action of how we are supposed to behave as Jews. So let's just read a practical lesson that we I think had at the end of last week, but just in case, I'll just read it again. The practical lesson on page 380, the destruction of the temple didn't result in God's presence being banished from any earthly presence. Now it's available in our sacred texts, the 4 cubits of Jewish law. So the 4 cubits, which is the 6 feet around us, when we study Torah, that's where in that presence, in that aura, God's presence is found. And that's what we're doing right now. So look around you, in the feet around you, you have God's presence studying right next to you, studying right across you. Okay, 381, I'll be pulling up the screen and let's study together. And what did Ari die from? I don't know. I see that question now. I don't know. I think it was a plague that was going across, but obviously he died from God, right? It was obviously, it's not something that we could have wished. Oh, we wish he would have lived longer. Of course, we could wish that, but obviously it was a divine desire that his teachings are until that time. Okay, 381, section 2, how your mind can become God's temple. All this, let's make this a little bigger. All this provides a lesson in your daily struggle to become aware of God's presence. Chapter 33 taught that a true home for God is made when your consciousness is filled with a non-dual awareness of God's presence, right? Realizing that God is in everything. In this world, God is fully not connected with, but everything is God. But what do you do when your mind doesn't produce the desired effect? The Tanya offers us a lesson from history. When the revelation at Sinai couldn't be contained, they built a temple to contain it. So if your mind can't contain the divine, make yourself a temple. Immerse yourself in the 4 cubits of Jewish law. So just to explain that, let's read it first inside and then we'll summarize it. So therefore, after you have probed with your mind to the best of your ability the above idea of extinguishing your separate identity through awareness of God's non-duality, as we discussed in chapter 33, when your mind has reached its limit and you can't focus on it anymore, say the following to your heart. So here's a narration of what you should say to your heart when you feel that you can't do it anymore. You've worked on meditating on God's non-dual existence, that everything in this world is God. But when you feel like you've reached the limit, this is what you should say. Being that my mind and soul root are too inadequate to become a genuine and consistent chariot or tabernacle for God's non-dual oneness. If you remember, we said that just like Abraham, our patriarch, was a chariot, and the forefathers were chariots for God, which means everything around them was fully surrendered to do God's will. Their entire being and desire was only godly. So at a certain point when we feel we can't live up to that, we can't do that anymore, what should you do then? You should make a home for God inside you. Let's see. Since my mind can't grasp or understand him in any way at all, with any thought system in the world, not even a tag end of the grasp of the patriarchs or the prophets, meaning you can't even hold on to the heels, to the end of the cloak, of the cape of these giants. This being the case, I shall make myself a chariot for him and a firm place for his resting in a different way. That is possible for me through immersion in Torah study, scheduling fixed times for study, day and night, according to the time available to me. So, and we'll see more, but it's just, I have to tell you, last night I was with someone in our community who is Shabbat observant. So we don't see him on Shabbat because he lives too far to walk, and he doesn't drive on Shabbat. And so before COVID, we would study once a week together in person. And we would study Talmud together. So we had our time together that he felt connected and part of the Jewish life here. And we obviously we switched to virtual, to Zoom, to try to study, but it didn't work for him. He's not that type of person, and it was hard for him to study without it. So what I'm amazed at is, I was with him last night, finally getting back together, and the stride he's taken in daily Torah study. And you could see it shining on his face. It's not like he gave up and he said, listen, COVID's here, I can't study with a rabbi. He studied on his own. And I'm amazed at the amount of study. Every morning and every evening, he had a set time for Torah study. And it really, really inspired me. So what we're saying here is when the temple, when the Jews came to Moses and they said at Sinai that we can't contain the enormous revelation, it's too much for us, we can't handle it. What was the next command to do? Build a home for God in this world. So in a micro way, in a personal level, when we feel, listen, we're trying to live up to the standard of surrender that our patriarchs and Moses had, but at a certain point, we're not even close to them. So what is the command that we are given is make a temple for God in your heart, which is when you set time for Torah study. As we said before, where is God found after the temple was destroyed? In the four cubits of our Torah study. So when we study Torah, and I'm looking on the screen, so many of us have times that we study together, but also times that you have your personal time to study, or just one-on-one with a friend. And when you do that, what it's doing, it's literally making a home for God in your heart. Whether you understand it all completely and thoroughly and you can repeat it back, or whether you don't. It takes time to fully grasp an idea, and sometimes it takes review and patience, of course. But what it can do is literally making a home for God. And we'll see more. I want to finish this idea. We'll see that not only during that half an hour or 20 minutes is your time transformed to holy, it also affects the rest of your day, that you're not studying. Because you can't study all day. It's a fact. We have to go to work. We have to earn a living. We have to do other things. But still, what we're going to see soon is not only the time that we fix to Torah study is holy, the rest of the day is also. And the same is going to be with charity. Not only the money we give to charity becomes holy, also the other percent, the 90% that we don't give, also that is part of the holiness. And we'll have to see from this beautiful teaching of the Alter Rebbe how that happens. But I'm just giving you a little bit of a spoiler of what we're about to read. Let's see it inside. So we're in the middle of this narration that we're supposed to tell her. We just finished this narration that the Alter Rebbe tells us that we should speak to ourselves, that even though I can't live up to the surrender of the patriarchs and Moses and the prophets, but I'll make myself a chariot in a way that I can handle, which is I'll set fixed times, and during that time, I'm fully involved in my Torah study. I put my phone away, and I put my focus on Torah. No matter, I'm up to the middle paragraph of the screen. No matter how much you struggle to appreciate God's non-dual oneness, you can always make yourself a temple to the divine presence through the study of sacred texts. In fact, even if you are not a Torah scholar and have limited time and ability to study, this path is still open to you. So long as you follow the decree that was issued, which is a quote from the Megillah Esther, to each and every person in the laws of Torah study concerning how much each person ought to study. And in accordance with the teachings of our sages of blessed memory, that if time and or ability are lacking, then it's enough even if a person has repeated only a single chapter in the morning and only a single chapter in the evening, which means you're spending 5 minutes of Torah study a day, 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening, so 10 minutes. Even that allows that you making a temple for God in your heart, in your home. So to appreciate God's non-duality, that takes much more effort, much deeper meditation to see God in everything. You could speak it, but to truly appreciate it and feel it, that's a whole nother level. The patriarchs saw that fully. When they saw anything, they saw God. Not all of us are on that level. But what we could do is bring God into our home, into our hearts, by setting fixed times for Torah study. And this should cheer your heart. Remember, the whole point of these chapters were to talk to us about triggering that beautiful joy that we need in our heart to serve God in the correct fashion. So to serve God, you need joy. So when you realize that just setting a fixed time and taking the time to study, that itself is causing a home for God. So it should bring you a joy in your heart, realizing that you're accomplishing something incredible. Something wondrous, a home for God in your heart. So this should cheer your heart and cause you to rejoice, giving thanks for your lot in life with joy and with gladness of heart, for meriting, when you study a single chapter twice a day, to be a host for the Almighty, like the holy temple, according to the limits of your available time and according to the opportunities lavished upon you by God. So I have to say that it's always been a dream, and it still is, and we know it will happen, for us to be in the place of the Holy Temple. Just imagine, a couple of years ago, we gave, during this period before the destruction of the temple, before Tisha B'Av, we study and we learn about what the temple looked like and what it will look like. So a few years ago, we gave a class, a virtual tour of the temple. It was it was a very popular class. Vivian, you were there. I think Shira, you were there as well. And it was a very nice virtual class that we walked through the temple and learned about what it looked like. But it's always been a dream to see what it looks like. Over here, we're saying that You're making your own temple for God by studying Torah. That should bring you great joy to know that the way the temple was built by Solomon, and then by Ezra and Nehemiah for the second temple, and how it was an incredible edifice for God. You're making an incredible edifice for God. You're making an even greater one, because that's what God says. Since the day the temple was destroyed, God is found in your Torah study. So taking the time to study, and by the way, you may ask me, what should I study? The Rebbe was asked this question quite often, and the answer the Rebbe always gave, quoting the Talmud, where it says that person should always study b'makim sheli b'chafetz. A person should always study in the area that he desires. Some people desire Talmud. Some people, Talmud doesn't speak with them. It's too analytical. The process to get to the bottom line is like too complicated. Some people prefer law. Some people prefer Chassidus, which is more the mysticism. Or some people prefer just Chumash, Rashi, understanding the basics of the Torah. Some people prefer ethics of the fathers or another type of Mishnah. There's so much to study. And actually, Adina and I are planning the upcoming courses and classes for the upcoming year. And just to give you a little bit of a heads up, we're planning to redouble our efforts. During COVID, a lot was lost in our ability to teach while we did it virtually, but there's something beautiful about the in-person. So we're giving a lot more offerings coming up for the new year, starting in, God willing, in September during the high holiday season. Torah and Teas by Adina and women circles as well, but also different topics that I plan to cover. One of them is beautiful teachings of the Rebbe on what Chassidus is. So Chassidus is the spiritual mysticism of the Torah taught by the Chabad Rebbes, starting with the Tanya. But what Chassidus accomplishes, the Rebbe gives in a beautiful talk that it's called On the Essence of Chassidus. So I'm giving a 6-week class on that. And then another one that I always wanted to do is a section of duties of the heart. It's called Chovat Halavavot. It was written almost 1,000 years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, it was written in Arabic, which was the language of the Jews in Spain, where it was written. But we will be doing a very special class on Shar HaBitachon, which is a section of duties of the heart. It's called the Gates of Faith and Trust in God. So God willing, that'll be another exciting one. Do you learn all of it, or do you specialize in one area like you would at university? So, you know, that's actually Maddie's question that I just see here. That's a great question. Our dream should be to study all of it. But the main, you gain more when you zone into one section, and when you focus on one part, you chip away step by step. You'll end up learning a lot more. The Rebbe, the truth be told, Maddie, the Rebbe actually wanted everyone to study the whole Torah. So the Rebbe started a system of studying Maimonides. Maimonides goes through the entire Torah, taking the Talmud and condensing it in a way that's kind of like the law. And he does it in volumes, in 14 volumes. So the Rebbe actually encourages, starting from the 80s, we just finished the 40th cycle of studying Rambam, that some people study 3 chapters a day and finish the entire Rambam. It's called Mishnah Torah, Maimonides, in 10 and a half, 11 months or so. Or there's another option to study it in 3 years, which is 1 chapter a day. But doing that, you actually finish learning a taste of what the entire Torah is. That's studying the Mishnah Torah. And nowadays, there's an app that you could do it. There's audios. You could listen to it on your walk or on your drive. And in 15 minutes, you could have a chapter a day covered by a teacher in English, or if you prefer Russian, you could have a teacher in Russian, or whatever language. It's really, really well done. So the Rebbe did want us to have a taste of the entire Torah. And by studying Rambam, Maimonides, you actually have that opportunity, which is also pretty cool. And I think Shira, I think you were doing it for a while, studying that Rambam. Okay. I'm going to pull the screen back up. Oh, and I'm sorry, I think I missed a question or two. So Shira says, this Shabbat, Shabbat Chazon. Exactly, it's the Shabbat of vision of the third temple. Awesome. Another question that came in privately. I don't feel like I'm making a home for God when I read it. So it's beautiful. So someone says that when they study, they don't feel the home for God being built in their heart. And that's a beautiful thing. It's almost, if you take a relationship, sometimes you don't feel doing the menial tasks of a relationship whether it's making laundry or taking the garbage out or moving whatever needs to be done. You don't feel a relationship being built. But the truth be told, sometimes the deepest parts of a relationship are built through the smallest things that don't seem that important, that can make all the difference in the world. And the same is also when you study Chumash, especially if it's the written Torah, which is what the Torah, the 5 books of Moses is. Even if you don't fully understand all the words, definitely you should try. But even just by studying it and connecting with God through the words of the Torah, that itself is making a home. When it comes to oral Torah, which is Talmud or Hasidus, then it's the important part is actually understanding it and making a home for God through your intelligence, understanding it. Okay, awesome. One more question. I thought we are supposed to read the daily parsha as this top priority for Torah study, but I think you implied we should study Talmud or other kinds of stuff. So definitely don't study Talmud if it's not your, like I study Talmud every day. But wherever, my main point was to give you examples of wherever your heart is speaking to you, that's where you should study. So if you enjoy learning Chumash, learn Chumash. If you feel that it's not really resonating and you only have half an hour a day, you should study something that does resonate with you. It'll get you a lot further when you enjoy what you're studying. So if you start something, I wouldn't say try once and stop. Sometimes it takes the development of a month to get the rhythm, to get the style of study of a different text. But if it's not working after a month, then I would say recalibrate or reassess.
May I ask you a question in that regard?
Yeah, of course.
So I like studying the Chumash.
Yeah. We enjoy you studying your Chumash because we all benefit from it. So
the Devar of Torah, but then in the afternoon or evening, I often will do something like the 4 Keys of Kabbalah.
Nice.
Kabbalah,
yeah, from Rebbe Rice. That's a great book. Yeah.
Which I bought from our synagogue.
Yeah.
But is that considered? I mean, that's going back. That's reading a rabbi's version, but it's not actually Talmud or.
That's a good question. That's a good question. Steve, what do you say if you read a book about Torah? Steve, what do you say that's counted as Torah study?
It depends on your intention when you read it, I think.
Let's to get a spiritual journey, to increase my spirit.
If it is to improve yourself rather than gain information, then maybe it's study of Torah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Great answer. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
If it's trying to internalize it, Steve, trying to internalize what this Rabbi Rice is saying into my life.
Yes. I would say that could be Torah study.
I like that. Good. Does everyone agree? Does anyone have a different perspective on that? That's an interesting discussion. Okay, awesome. Let's continue.
I do have a different.
Go ahead.
I've been operating under the understanding that it's absolutely necessary for me to read the Parsha every day. And now it sounds like it's not. I just wrote in the chat box that it's just as good or holy to read the 4 Keys of Kabbalah, which I have, or Pirkei Avos, or any of the many, many Jewish books that we have. Is that true, or is it really most desirable to read the Chumash, even though I don't necessarily feel that connected to what I'm reading?
I would say the hope is that if you read other books that maybe inspire you more, it'll then enhance your desire to want to study Torah and Chumash in the correct way. So I would never say that stop studying the Chumash and study something else like the 4 Keys of Kabbalah. That's obviously a rabbi's take on Torah, and that's Torah itself. So there's definitely going to be a difference there. I don't know. I guess we could talk offline, Mrs. Berger. I'm not going to spend too much time on deciding, but we could hash it out a little more. I could help you if you want me to help you with suggestions. And
I would like that. Okay, thank you.
We could talk offline. I like that. Great, sure. All right, here we go. We are back in section 3. So how to be a temple for God all day. So till now we were talking about when you study Torah, even if it's just a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening, you're making a home for God. But now what about the rest of your day? Is that, okay, now I made a temple, but now I'm leaving the temple and I'm going to attack the workplace, to work on mundane things. So here's a beautiful section of the Tanya where it says, no. Even when you're in your day, you're also making a temple for God. So that's section 3. If you're looking in the book, it's going to be on 382 at the bottom, or just look up on the screen. And you should make a firm decision now that if God will lavish upon you the time and ability to study Torah in the future, then the clean of hands will increase in strength. It's a quote from Job. I don't know that quote so well. And you will study Torah as much as you possibly can. Let me just read this again. And you should make a firm decision now that if God will lavish upon you the time. So if you have the luxury to be able to study Torah all the day, all your time, then you'll study as much as you can. But right now, when you can't study for more than a limited time each day, how do you make yourself a temple for God the rest of the day? You don't have that luxury, that ability to study Torah all day. Whether because you have to earn a living, or even if you're retired, but just your focus and attention span can't study Torah all day, you're going to come to resent it. So you have other things in your day that you're doing. So first, the Tanya answers, and the Blessed Holy One attaches a good thought to the deed. Even if you just have that desire to want to study all day, that itself, God already considers it like action. If you decide that now that you will study Torah all day, whenever you will have the opportunity in the future, that's enough for God to attach a good thought to the planned deed and consider it as if you actually study all day. I found this interesting. We have what in Yiddish is called a Farbringen. Farbringen is a Hasidic gathering where the point of it is not to have a class. The point of Farbringen is to inspire each other. So usually the books are closed. It's more trying to internalize the message that we studied. So people will share different things that they have been studying, but not giving over word for word, but giving over an idea and a message and a lesson that they are taking from. So one of the common things that are Farbringen is some l'chaim. So it opens the person up, it opens their heart up to be a little more vulnerable, to be able to think bigger about themselves and to try to reach and attain higher. And also the reason why we say traditionally we take a little bit of l'chaim is that someone could open up a little bit about what they're feeling without having to feel judged and ridiculed by others, because if you have a little bit of l'chaim, you're a little more warmed up. But one of the other common things that are Farbringen is to take a hachlata, to take a resolution. When you're in an inspired state, you take a resolution to do a little more, to be a little more patient, or to study a little stronger. So a lot of times you take that inspirational thing, you do it for a week, and then it kind of fizzles out. So what we're saying here is even if you just have that inspiration to want to do it, Hashem will, if you genuinely want it, Hashem will count it as if you achieved it already, which is a beautiful thing. If your mind is there and your intentions are there, Hashem, who knows the insides of your hearts, will already consider it as if you are doing it. So now that's number one. But you're still lacking a tangible expression of your temple because you're not actually doing it all day. So the Tanya now offers a second suggestion, and this is beautiful. How to maintain your personal temple status in actual deed. And even the rest of the entire day, when you will be occupied with business, unable to study Torah, you can be a firm place for his resting for God through giving charity, which is given from your hard-earned income. Of all the practical mitzvot, why does charity render you the closest to a temple for God? So just first of all, the answer is by you earning a living and hard-earned income that you are earning, and you take from that and you give charity, that's also a way of making a temple for God. Because all of that energy that you put throughout your day to earn money, you're giving from that a section of it, a percentage of it to charity. You're making a home for God, a temple for God through that charity. Why is charity singled out as a mitzvah that makes a temple for God over any other one? So let's see. Since charity is one of the character traits of God, and we see from the Talmud, it says, just as God, he is merciful and kind, so you must be merciful and kind. And as stated in Tikkunei Zohar, chesed, generosity, is the right hand of God. So we know, by the way, just till today, when we do mitzvot, when we give charity, for example, we give it with our right hand. Because unless you're a lefty and then your right hand is your left hand. But for most of us, we are righties, and we give charity with our right hand because that's where God and His generosity is coming from the right hand of God. So our love and our kindness, we usually emphasize it with our right hand. When we shake hands and we show interest in another person, we extend our right hand. It's just showing respect, showing kindness. And when we do things, we usually do it with our right hand first. When we raise a glass for l'chaim, we usually raise our right glass. Actually, it's interesting when the Rebbe would say l'chaim to people by a farbrengen. If you've been to my home, you see a painting, a picture of a big farbrengen with a lot of chassidim, and the Rebbe at the head table at the dais. You see the Rebbe at farbrengens. You can see the Rebbe saying l'chaim to people. And sometimes, if someone was holding up their left hand, the Rebbe would ask them to switch their hand. The Rebbe at the end of holidays, the Rebbe would make havdalah, which is what we do typically on Saturday night and the end of any holiday. We take a glass of wine, or grape juice, and we make a blessing separating the holy day from the mundane. So, but the Rebbe, after making havdalah, the Rebbe would actually remain there and give from his cup of blessing, would give to all the chassidim. Men and women would line up in separate lines, and the Rebbe would give them from his cup. Obviously, there wasn't enough in that cup to give so many chassidim. Sometimes it spanned an hour or two, sometimes 5 or 6 if it was after a holiday. And so there was someone by the Rebbe pouring more into the cup, but always keeping some of the Rebbe's blessing in there of the wine, so it always refilled. But also, sometimes the Rebbe would tell the person to switch hands if they put out their left hand instead of their right hand. And also, the famous dollar that the Rebbe would give to people on Sunday mornings, also the Rebbe gave it from his right hand and wanted it to go into your right hand. So as we see, that the kindness of God comes from the right side. So, and the point what we're trying to say over here is charity is a character trait of God, a character of kindness that God has. So when we give charity, we are emulating God and hence making a temple for God, which He feels at home with the power of charity. Ultimately, it is Torah and not mitzvot that makes you a temple for the divine. As we learned above, the blessed Holy One has no dwelling place in His world for His non-dual oneness, other than the 4 cubits of Jewish law. So really, it's from Torah study. Why are we adding charity into the mix? But if we were to choose one mitzvah as a very close approximation, it would be charity, because in giving charity, you are emulating one of the attributes of God. So really, it's coming from Torah, but we don't have the luxury to study Torah all day. So the next best thing to make a home for God, other than Torah study, is going to be through the mitzvah, especially of charity. That when we go to work and we earn an income, don't feel that you are outside of your temple. You're actually making a temple in your workplace by taking that hard-earned income and giving some of it to charity. And not to, I guess this is a free advertisement for Chabad of Nevada, but we have people that give sporadically, which is important. Then we also have people that give monthly, and for them it's beautiful. Whether it's a $3 a day coffee or a $5 latte that they could have had at Starbucks, but they're saying, you know what, I'm going to give $50 or $100, $180 a month to Chabad. It comes out at the end of the year to $1,200 or $1,800. But that way, it's counted as a monthly and even a daily giving of charity, which also is just beneficial on our terms, to know what we have at the beginning of the month for the programs that we want to plan, that we have a steady income that we know we could rely on. But that's all coming from the right side. So I don't know if Visa or MasterCard is considered the right or the left, but we consider them all to be on the right, and it's from the right hand of God. So when you do that, and you're taking from your earnings, and it's beautiful, whether you're living off of current earnings that you work now and you get your paycheck at the end of the week or month, or whether it's from what you worked on during your career and now you're on retirement, it's all from the hard-earned income. You're retroactively elevating all of that and making a temple for God in that hard-earned income, which is amazing. I love it, because even if you didn't have the intention at the time of work that I'm going to give charity and therefore all of this is being elevated, it's able to be done retroactively as well. It's almost like for a Jewish woman that goes to mikveh, even if she hasn't gone to mikveh in the past, when she uses the mikveh now, it's able to elevate all the previous times that she didn't go to the mikveh. It's the power of a mitzvah, right? And usually we don't have this luxury to go back in our past. But that's what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is eternal because it's coming from God who is eternal. And therefore, teshuvah is eternal, right? A person could change their past by doing teshuvah. They're able to actually go into their past if they do tshuva out of love and elevate parts of their life that were wrong to now be considered good by springboarding those parts to change their ways. Anyway, that's for a different discussion, but just an important topic to touch on. So even charity, though, is not something that you can do totally with all your income, right? You're not allowed to give all your income to charity. So if I'm giving 10%, or if I'm being a little extra generous and extra of a chassid, it says a chassid is someone that gives 20%. It's a big chunk. So they make $100,000. They're giving $20,000 to charity. But that's only the 20,000. What about the rest of it? How could this even be an approximate replacement for all-day Torah study, which renders you a constant temple for the divine? And even though you only give 1/5 of your income to charity, 10%, the preferred amount in Jewish law. Nevertheless, this fifth, listen to this beautiful line, elevates the other 4 parts with it to God, so that they all become a firm place for his resting for God. So once again, you give 10%, but it elevates the other 90%. You give 1/5. The other 4 are elevated as well. I'm wondering if he's going to quote from Joseph here, because that's a quote from Joseph. He doesn't mention the quote. Okay, let's see further. You can't give all your money to charity because then you wouldn't be able to live. The sages mandate that you give at least 1/10 of your net income to charity, and that you should preferably give 1/5, 20%. Here, the Tanya suggests that by giving 1/5, the other 4/5 are elevated, rendering all your money and all your business endeavors carried out to earn that money a kind of temple for God. I love this paragraph because you would think that if I'm giving 10% of my earnings, that means 10% of my work hours are holy because 10% is going to charity. So 10% of my daily earning is holy. But over here he's saying no. The rest is holy also. By giving 10%, you're elevating the other 4. By giving 1/5, you're elevating the other 4 parts also. This idea of the 1/5 and 4, that he puts it in a quote, but he doesn't actually show you the quote. It's actually from Joseph and Pharaoh. It says that when Joseph was the viceroy and he figured out a way to store everything for the years of hunger that were coming upon Egypt, he told everyone that that you get to keep 4 parts of your storage, and one of the parts you have to give to Pharaoh. So Kabbalistically, we're not going to get into the mechanics of it, but Kabbalistically, Pharaoh is a allusion to God. And there's a Pharaoh of Klippa, which is bad, but then there's a Pharaoh of Kedusha that we have to transform. And similar to that, 1/5 of our earnings you give to God, but when you do that, the other 4 become elevated as well. But what's the logic here? We're to the bottom half of the page. How do the 4/5 of your income that you keep for yourself attain a spiritual level of charity? You're keeping it. It's not God, it's yours. So the Tanya now offers 2 explanations. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to see the chat because my screen is shared, but I will get to it after reading, after turning the page over here. One illustration of the logic here is from the well-known statement of our sages of blessed memory, which says like this. It's from Tractate Sukkah. It says that the mitzvah of charity is equivalent to all the sacrifices. So when you give charity, it's as if you're giving all the beautiful sacrifices that were brought into the temple. And by the way, the sacrifices were from all species. They were from the inanimate, like there was salt that was offered on it. There was water and wine. All that is no life in them, obviously. Then there was from the vegetable kingdom, the vegetative kingdom. In Hebrew, it's called sameach. We had flour that was offered on the temple, and other vegetative from the plant kingdom, spices, and the incense offering. And then there's obviously animals, from birds to different kosher animals. So the point is that when you give charity, it's as if all the offerings were offered. And I'll just tell this to you outside and then we'll read it inside. When you gave an offering, it didn't only elevate that offering, whether it was oil that you brought, it elevated that entire species, that entire kind, that entire kingdom of whether it was vegetative or animal kingdom or from the inanimate, all of it, that entire kingdom, that entire species kind became elevated as well. So when it says that charity is likened to all the offerings, it's the same thing, that it elevates not only the money you gave to charity, it elevates the rest of your earnings as well. I'm saying that a little quick. I hope that made sense, but let me see it inside. The mitzvah of charity is equivalent to all the sacrifices. And in the case of the sacrifices, the Zohar teaches that one single animal offered as the Karban Tamid daily offering, right? It was a sheep that was offered, caused the entire animal kingdom to be elevated to God. And the entire plant kingdom elevated through 1/10 of an ephah, which was a measurement of fine flour mixed with oil. So this answer is that how is it that my charity is making a temple for God when it's just a percentage that I'm giving? The answer he's giving is just like the offerings, that when I gave my simple offering, it elevated then that entire species, that entire kind of kingdom. When I give my earning, just a percentage of it, it elevates the rest of my earnings as well. So I give 1/5 or any amount that you're able to give, the other parts of it also become elevated as well. There is, however, a problem with this logic. One single animal did not literally cause the entire animal kingdom to be elevated to God. All the animals in the world did not suddenly attain the sacred status of sacrifices when one sacrifice was offered. What the Tanya means to say is that all animals became very slightly easier to elevate in the future. Due to this problem, the Tanya now offers a second explanation for the elevation dynamic. And the Rebbe, this is the quote from the Rebbe, but let's see what the explanation is. And besides this first explanation, when you study Torah and pray, you elevate to God everything that you ate, drank, and benefited from for the sake of your body's health. From the remaining 4/5, which were not elevated directly through the 1/5 of your income given to charity. If you don't mind, I'm going to just explain this, repeat this paragraph again. Besides this first explanation, when you study Torah and pray, you elevate to God everything that you ate, drank, and benefited from for the sake of your body's health. From the remaining 4/5, which were not elevated directly through the 1/5 of your income given to charity. Okay, I think I understand it, as will be explained later on. So the 1/5 you're giving to charity. What are you doing with the rest of the income? You're buying yourself food. You're paying your mortgage. You're putting clothing on you. You're buying linen for you to sleep on in a bed. You're even paying for a vacation. Whatever it is, or you're giving an allowance to your children. Whatever it is, it's allowing you the ability to be able to study. Because the other 4/5 that you're spending on what you need is giving you the ability to be able to focus on your study. Because now you ate breakfast with your hard-earned income, or you drank a coffee, or you went away for a few days, and your mind is at ease and calm. So with that hard-earned income, you are giving yourself the ability to focus on your Torah study, to give yourself the ability and the energy to pray with patience, because you're not hungry and you're not angry, because you're taking care of yourself and you had a good night's sleep. So your hard-earned income is actually part of the holiness. So that's different. So just to recalibrate over here, the first explanation, again, the question was, how could my charity, which I'm giving a percentage of, elevate and make a home for God, a temple for God, for the entire day, which is not part of the temple because I'm out in the rat race of life, making an income. I'm doing other things. So the first explanation is similar to the offerings, which when you give one, it slightly elevates the rest. So when you give charity, it also elevates the rest of your income. But the Rebbe says, the reason why the Alter Rebbe gives a second explanation is because it's not a perfect example, because by the animals, it doesn't fully elevate the rest of the animals, but by your money, it does fully elevate the rest of your money. So he gives a second explanation here, which says that the other 4 parts of your income, the other 90% of your income that you're using for yourself, you're using for your family, it's giving you the ability to be able to study. It's giving you the energy to pray. So in that way, it's actually elevated as well. I missed a few Hasidic thoughts and insights, so let's go for that, and we're going to try to finish the chapter today. Hasidic thought on page 383 at the bottom says like this: while it may not feel the same, Torah study resembles the experience of the divine in the Holy Temple. In the temple, God was contained, so to speak, in the Holy of Holies. In Torah study, God's will is contained in the final legal rulings, which represent his undiluted will. So in the halacha, which is the law part of Torah, that's where you see God's will, undiluted. Another one on 384, practical lesson, it says, resolve in your heart that if you will have the opportunity to study all day, you will do so. And God will consider it as if you actually did. Also, by giving to charity, you elevate yourself to be a temple to God. Beautiful. And the more a person gives, the more prone they are to be generous, by the way. You may think, I already gave, I don't have to give anymore. A person who gives, they get hooked on it. They just enjoy it. I've given the story before of a very known Chabad philanthropist in Russia and Ukraine. His name is Bagalubov. He never gave a cent to charity. And he once went with a friend of his to the soup kitchen in the Chabad in Dnepropetrovsk in Ukraine. And his friend gave money to the soup kitchen. And he was saying, why are you giving? Let these people find a job. And the rabbi who was there explained, our job is not to ask why they don't have food. Our job is just to be able to give. So Bagalubov, he gave he gave like 100 ruble or whatever he gave. And he came back a few days later and he gave a massive amount. He gave $10,000. Within a year, he gave over $1 million. And he speaks about this. He spoke at the Chabad conference, I think 6 or 7 years ago. It was incredible. I was there. And he says how he just had a joy in giving. It just felt so good. When you become generous, when you start giving, you get into the routine where you just, you want it. It's an incredible thing. Okay, section 4. We're trying to finish the chapter. Here we go. We're going to go a little bit overtime. I apologize for that. But it's because of my scheduling before that I was telling you guys about that puts us a few minutes out. Anyway, integrating negative and positive emotions. A long section of the Tanya dealing with emotional maintenance, which began in chapter 26, now draws to a close. In chapters 26 to 28, we learned various methods to deal with depression arising from both material and spiritual concerns. In chapters 29 and 30, we learned a number of meditations to humble the spirit so as to overcome emotional insensitivity. Right? Remember when we were desensitized to spirituality, which is Timtum Alev. And in chapters 31 and 34, we have learned a number of meditations to lead us to joy. The reason why he's not mentioning 32 is because that was more of a parenthetical chapter talking about love to another. But the main thing was really working within ourselves, which was chapters 31, 33, and 34. The point was to get us to a place of joy. So the Tanya now concludes by stressing that the negative and positive emotions we have explored are not mutually exclusive. And it is possible to integrate both into your heart at the same time. Because some of the meditations were screaming at our animal soul and saying, stop wasting my time. Let me be my true self. But some of them were very powerful to our holy side, saying I'm like a princess, that every time I do a mitzvah, it's like a voice of my father coming back to me. Who wouldn't want to hear a voice of their father that they didn't hear in 30 years? So a princess who's lost and now is able to be back in her father's home, in her palace, it's an incredible feeling. Every time you do a mitzvah, you're giving that vitamin, that spiritual dose of energy to your godly soul. So there's conflicting, and we just learned another meditation on the previous pages. So it almost seems that either I'm doing this one or I'm doing that one. So they're saying they're not mutually exclusive. Now, with all the above detailed meditations that bring joy to the soul, there is nothing to stop you being disgusting in your eyes and repulsive, brokenhearted and ego deflated at the very same time that you are joyous. You could focus, you could be multitasking. On the animal side, you could be ego deflated. You could say, you don't own me. I'm not a slave to you. But to the positive side, I could say, wow, I feel so lucky that I can make a home for God. And that brings you to a place of joy. Because being disgusting in your eyes, etc. I know these words seem a little odd, if you weren't with us when we studied chapter 30, but over there we were going through the interventions of looking at the negative side and looking at our past and saying that's repulsive. That's not a behavior that is appropriate for me. So being disgusting in your eyes is a reflection of your body and animal soul, and being joyful is a reflection of your divine soul, and the spark of godliness enmeshed in it, energizing it, as mentioned above in chapters 31. Since you have two souls, it's possible for you to have two different feelings simultaneously. The Tanya now cites the precedent for this from the Zohar for this approach. And it was in reference to such a case of experiencing opposite emotions simultaneously that the Zohar states that when Rabbi Shimon revealed wondrous secrets that explained the destruction of the temple, his son Rabbi Elazar said that he felt tearfulness lodge into my heart on one side as a result of the heightened awareness of this temple's destruction, and joy lodged into my heart on the other side as a result of the revelation of wondrous new Torah insight. So I'm just going to stop sharing, but this last part is stunning, and I just want to explain a little bit of what we're studying. It says that Rabbi Shimon, when he studied Torah, it was an incredible experience. Everyone was uplifted. So he was teaching his son, whose name was Rabbi Elazar, about the destruction of the temple that they lived shortly afterward. And he was teaching secrets about the deeper meaning of the temple of destruction. So on one hand, his son, Rabbi Elazar, was in such tears, learning about the temple of destruction. What a sad day when the temple was destroyed. But on the other side, he was so happy and joyous having this experience of incredible teachings of the Torah about the destruction of the temple. So there was tears wedged in his heart on one side and joy wedged in his heart on the other side. And it wasn't conflicting because it was on different parts of his heart. At this, in a similar place, when it comes to our ability to compartmentalize and say the animal soul, I'm going to be repulsive of. The godly soul, I'm going to be joyous that I can make a home for God in my Torah study. I can make a home for God in my charity giving. So that brings me to a place of joy that I'm making a home for God. And there's an experience of the soul back at home. That is an incredible joy for my soul and for God. Like we were learning last week, it's like a doubled and a redoubled joy. We're learning in chapter 33. But at the same time, I feel repulsive of my animal soul. Why is that not a contradiction? Is because I have two souls. If I had one soul, I could only be feeling one thing. But I have two souls. So towards the animal soul, I'm feeling repulsive. Towards the godly soul, I'm feeling joy. Okay, for those that have to go, I apologize for being a little bit overtime. But you're welcome to go, but I'm sorry for not answering the questions yet. So I'm going to get to those now. So from Shira, so does 1/5 really mean 10%? Yep. That's what I give. I give 10%. And there's even if you want, we have at home, Adina's actually was just reading it, the details of law that a person, of what they give, of understanding the 10% they give. 1/10 would be 10%, 1/5. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. So 1/5 is 20%. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for correcting Ava. I appreciate it. Sometimes my rabbi math, I'm only good at numbers within 18. So if you want to know how much is 20 times 18 when a person wants to give to charity, I could whisk that out for you in a moment. But just trying to understand what Shulchan Aruch says, I thought it said 1/5, but I hear Rabbi Landis says 10%. So Shira, and I remember I promised you, I think last week, that we were going to get to it. So and tell me if I didn't answer your question properly, but the average amount that we are mandated to give in Torah, like it's a halach, we are to keep Shabbos, we are to keep kosher and to fill in, we are to give 10% of our earnings to charity. That is 10%. Now, people that want to go over, because for them, a mitzvah is not just the bare minimum that we do, but we do more, then you could give up to 20%, up to 1/5. So that's ideal. You give that. But if in a relationship, one wants to give and one doesn't give, you don't have to give it. Give what the Torah mandates. And that when you're ready for it, try to give more. Or if something unexpected came in, like the stimulus, the stipend that came in, that you weren't expecting. So you could be a little more generous on that. So we gave 20% on that. We gave 1/5 on that. But so anyway, does that answer your question, Shira? What meditations specifically are being referred to? Oh, so specifically in this chapter, I think I mentioned them a little quickly. So, and specifically in this chapter was that when we are studying Torah, we are making a temple for God in our home, in our heart. And when we are giving charity, it's elevating everything. And that should bring me a joy because I'm making a temple for God through my regular daily routine, not even in my studying of Torah. The princess feeling that it's like a child whose parents died when they were young, and they would give anything to just be able to hear their parents' voice again. When you do a mitzvah, it's like the ability of your soul hearing her father, God's voice again. It's like the child, the princess being back in her father's palace. And that's another beautiful meditation. That was on the positive side. Now, on the negative side, it's about looking at your animal soul and saying, you're nothing. You don't own me. You're repulsive. You're dirty. You're wasting my time. You're ruining my relationships. Get away. I can make a home for God via my Torah study and tzedakah giving. Is that the meditation of something? Or say, yeah, you got it. Yeah, you good. Awesome. Thank you. 10%. Toda. Awesome. Okay, I think we got through it all. I apologize for a little bit of overtime. I will definitely be missing our class over the next 2 weeks. If you missed any of the recordings, I urge you to go back and listen to some of the recordings. If you don't have the text, I could send you the link on Amazon, or you could buy it if you prefer a Kindle edition. I think it's like $9.99 for the Kindle, the screen that I have up here. And everyone have a great week. Reminder, this coming Sunday is Tisha B'Av. For those that have the strength, it's a fast day. I'm going to put out more information in an email. All right, everyone, have a great day. Shavua Tov, and see you soon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great to see everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Annie. Bye,
Thank
Nick.
you.
Bye, Adrian.
Thanks, Rabbi. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye, Shira. Bye,
Thank you.
Vivian. Bye, Mrs.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Steve. Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.